Picture this. It's the middle of a blazing hot summer back in 1518. And in the city of Strasbourg, people start to dance. But this isn't a party. It's a terrifying, unstoppable compulsion. This is the incredible true story of a plague that wasn't fought with medicine, but with music, and a fever that ended not in recovery, but in utter collapse. I mean, that's the real question here, isn't it? It's a question that has stumped historians and scientists for literally centuries. How does an entire city just spiral into a deadly dance marathon? Well, the answer takes us to a really dark place. It's a look into the power of the human mind when it's pushed way, way past its breaking point. And look, this isn't some myth or a piece of spooky folklore. We have records from the time, like this one. They paint this absolutely grim picture of a city completely in the grip of something they just couldn't understand. A joyless, relentless dance that you just couldn't escape. Okay, so to really get what happened here, we've got to go back to the very beginning, to the cobblestone streets of a city that was, you could say, already living on the edge. So, the stage is set, right? Strasbourg is just simmering with tension. We're talking years of famine, horrible diseases, and all kinds of social conflicts. It's basically a powder keg of anxiety and superstition, and it's all just baking under this oppressive summer sun. It all started with just one person, a woman named Frau Troffea. She just steps outside her house and starts dancing. No music, nothing, just this frantic, non-stop movement. But what's really insane is how fast it spread. Within a week, she wasn't alone anymore. By August, it was a full-blown epidemic. 400. Let that number sink in. 400 people. Not at some festival, but in a chaotic, desperate frenzy that took over the entire city. The sheer scale of it is it's what makes the whole thing so haunting. And we need to be crystal clear here. This was not a happy dance. The accounts from people who saw it describe this awful scene. The movements were jerky, convulsive. People's eyes were just vacant. Their feet were bruised and bleeding, and they were soaked in sweat. They'd even cry out for help, begging for it to stop, but their bodies just wouldn't listen, until many of them just collapsed and died from strokes, heart attacks, or pure exhaustion. So the city's in total chaos, and the authorities, they have to do something. But their solution, based on the medical knowledge of the time, turned out to be a catastrophic mistake. Yeah, the official diagnosis was hot blood. They figured it was just a natural sickness. And their prescription? Well, to them, it seemed logical. If someone has a fever, you make them sweat it out. And how do you do that? You guessed it, you make them dance even more. The city's response was just wild. Instead of trying to stop the dancers, they did the opposite. They built a stage for them, they hired musicians to keep a beat going 24/7, and they even paid people to hold up the dancers who were too exhausted to stand, just so they could keep going. And well, it was a complete and utter disaster. This huge public show, the non-stop drumming, it didn't cure a single person. In fact, it just made everything worse. The sight and the sound of it all just drew more people in, turning this bizarre outbreak into a full-on psychic contagion. So, as the years went by, people started looking for more scientific answers. And the first major suspect? A nasty little toxin that might have been hiding in the city's food supply. Let me introduce you to ergotism. See, rye was a staple food back then, and this fungus, ergot, can grow on it. And this fungus produces some really powerful, really toxic chemicals. It was actually a pretty well-known problem in medieval Europe. Now, when you look at the symptoms, it almost seems like a perfect match, right? Ergotism causes these violent muscle spasms, twitching, and some truly terrifying hallucinations. And get this, the chemical in the fungus is actually related to LSD. So yeah, that could definitely explain the weird, out-of-control movements and the delirious state of the dancers. But here's where that theory starts to fall apart. Ergot poisoning makes you incredibly sick. The idea that someone poisoned by it could have the physical endurance to dance for days on end is, well, it's pretty unlikely. And besides, why would hundreds of different people all react to a poison with the exact same, very specific behavior of dancing? It just doesn't quite add up. And that leads us to the second and frankly more widely accepted theory today. It suggests the plague wasn't in their bread, it was in their heads. It's a phenomenon called mass psychogenic illness. You might know it by its more famous name, mass hysteria. Basically, it's what happens when a group of people are under such extreme stress that it starts to manifest as real physical symptoms, and then those symptoms spread through the population just like a virus. The suffering is real, but the trigger is psychological. And this is why Strasbourg in 1518 was the perfect breeding ground for this. The city was practically drowning in despair. They were dealing with starvation, horrible diseases, major social upheaval. And on top of all of that, there was this very powerful local superstition about a figure named Saint Vitus, who was believed to punish sinners by, you guessed it, putting a curse on them that forced them to dance. So when you put the two theories side by side, the picture gets a whole lot clearer. Ergotism can explain the spasms, sure, but it really can't explain the sustained, coordinated dancing. Mass hysteria, though, it fits the historical context like a glove. It explains the behavior, and it explains how just seeing other people dancing could trigger the same condition, spreading it through this terrified population. And this is what historians like John Waller believe happened. The people of Strasbourg were caught in a kind of collective trance. Their minds were so overloaded with misery and fear that they latched on to this legend of St. Vitus's curse. And once they saw it happening to someone else, it confirmed their deepest fears, and it triggered the exact same symptoms in them. So in the end, this was a physical manifestation of pure hopelessness. It was a desperate subconscious release for minds that just couldn't take their reality anymore. It's a truly chilling example of how fragile we can be when we're pushed to our absolute limit. And that leaves us with one last, pretty sobering question. This story of despair from 500 years ago is an incredible reminder of that deep and sometimes terrifying connection between our minds and our bodies. It really makes you wonder, under the right kind of pressure, what sorts of plagues might be hiding inside of us?